Okay, so the final panel is going to be moderated by Julian Ma from RIG, researcher on the Robust Incentives team, Robust Incentives group at the EF. And then the panelists, Lucian Stroy from Boundless, Leland Lee from Succinct, Alex Truss-Michael from Ultrasound, Torsten Behrens from Galaxy Digital, and Jordi from Zisk.
Great talk. Thank you.
Do you want to be in the farthest?
Sorry?
Oh, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Do you want to go?
Yeah. Should I go for the farthest? Sure. Thank you. All right. Do you hear me? Or is it good? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here on Saturday, last day of DevConnect at 5 p.m. It's great to see that there's such a full audience still, and I guess that's a big congrats to the organization. So we're here to talk about who pays the provers, which I think is an important topic that's sometimes not as clear in the room. I'd like to start out with just a round of introductions. I'll go first, and then we'll head to Jordi. I guess most of you will already know him by now, and we'll go back here. So I'm Julian. I'm a researcher at the EF within the Robust Incentives group. We look at incentives within Ethereum very broadly, and I've been looking at prover incentives. We've been looking at how should provers be integrated within Ethereum systems. So if there's a slot, how much real-time proving time actually is there, and how does the protocol architecture work? And then we've been looking at the incentives directly. So who should pay the provers, and how much should they be paid? Yeah, I guess, Jordi, maybe if you want to have a word, or you can immediately go at it.
Regarding who pays the provers, I mean, at the end, who pays the provers is it should be included in the transaction fee. At the end, it's the users. I mean, the value is in Ethereum is created by the users. So at the end of the chain, it should be the users. It will be the users who pay there. Okay? So the question is, okay, what's the mechanism for the money go from the users to the provers in the right way? I think this is the right question. I mean, the difficult part of to solve.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. We'll dive into that. Just maybe Alex, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Alex from Ultrasound. We run one of the Ethereum relays, one of the bigger ones. Know somewhat about block building. I mean, I know we get a lot of blocks. We get thousands every slot. And I guess by now we have done quite a bit of thinking about the economics of, how do we get paid, where's the value with transactions, and how does it flow through the entire pipeline. So hope I can contribute a little bit from that perspective, even if I'm not a block builder myself.
Cool. Thorsten?
I'm with Galaxy Digital and also ETH staker, so I have a bit of a leg in both the professional staking world and the home and solo staking world. And I think here on this panel, the reason I'm on is to talk about local block builders and home and solo stakers and how that would impact them.
I'm Leland from Succinct. I'm the ecosystem lead, which means I spend most of my time talking to early stage partners on what it's like to use SP1 or ZKVM. But also, I talk to them a lot about how do you actually pay for proving on the network.
Hi, my name is Lucian. I'm with Boundless. Boundless is the first distributed permissionless ZK marketplace, and we're live. We launched about 2 months ago. So yeah, I'm going to talk about what it's like to actually have a on-chain marketplace for ZK proofs.
Awesome. Okay, so the setup for the panel would be. Is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah. The setup for the panel would be, we'll first go through the costs. So what does it actually take to create these proofs and look at the economics of that. So that would be the supply side. After that, we go to the demand side. So where does the money come from and what mechanism routes the money to the provers. And later, we'll zoom out a little and go into the L2 world and see, moving away from real-time proving, how does the other markets for ZK affect our market. So looking at the cost structure, maybe, Lucian, if you could start, how would you see the cost for proving for Ethereum blocks, and what is its composition? Is it mostly variable? Is it mostly fixed costs?
Yeah, so background, is this? Okay. So the background is Boundless was actually incubated out of Risk Zero. Doesn't seem to be working, but like this.
Speak loudly.
No.
Still close to you?
Thanks. Yeah.
So Boundless was incubated out of Risk 0, the first Risk 5 ZK VM. So we have quite a bit of time in production. Our first product was a centralized GPU compute marketplace. We called it Bonsai, and it's centralized, built on AWS, and our architecture is essentially using AWS on demand to scale up to the proving needs of clusters. So I think the most important thing that we did at Boundless is create a open permissionless participation set and get the hell off AWS, right? And there's certain things that are necessary for us to like, okay, we're proving Ethereum, and it is permissionless, it is principled, and it matches the liveness guarantees of Ethereum itself. Because if proof requests essentially have a dependency on some kind of centralized entity, and that goes down, it's unacceptable to actually have Ethereum halt ever.
That's very strong. I don't know, Leland, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so when it comes to improving Ethereum, the costs really vary depending on which underlying ZKVM you're using, as each ZKVM has very different performance characteristics. I think our goal at Succinct is we want to make our ZKVM as performant as possible and to cater to home provers. I think as time goes on and as the gas limit keeps on increasing, we want to maintain those same limits where, as the EF said, under 100K of CapEx, under 10,000 kilowatts. And so hopefully we can scale the gas limit 10x, 100x, while maintaining those limits as time goes on.
Okay, interesting. And Thorsten, could you maybe say a bit about what you think is acceptable costs as well for proving?
That's an excellent question, right? So we're looking at 100,000 in CapEx right now. OpEx depends at 10 kilowatt. Of course, that's the max, not the average. You're eating anywhere between 7,000 and 25,000 a year just in power, depending on where in the world you are. That's not going to work for home stakers. Right? That's a hugely centralizing idea. Now, with your idea of we're going to shove that across, we're going to decentralize that and everybody gets a chunk to prove and then we'll have redundancy, I think that can work. So if a home staker can just say, I'm putting a GPU in here, something small, we're probably not getting away from NVIDIA anytime soon. And or we're getting specialized hardware. I think that's going to happen. We're not going to prove on GPU forever. You already have teams working on things that have like a little RISC-V CPU and a specialized chip and shared memory in between to speed all this up. We could get to the point where someone can spend, I don't know, 700 to $1,000 and be under 1,000 watts and help prove. I think that would make it very decentralized.
Okay, that's very interesting. Maybe I'll skip Alex for now and we ask Jordi. Do you think something like $1,000 would be reasonable?
Well, I can tell exactly how much costs the Girona cluster, the one that you saw in the previous presentation. This is 16 normal gaming boxes. Each box each about 4K, more or less. So all the cluster, I can tell you that all the cluster, including the GPUs, the server, the hub, the installation, the air condition, the electrical installation, the setup, all together, even the installing cost of all that, the budget it's below. It's about 90K, so a little bit less than 100K. And regarding energy, I have not paid the first bill, and this of course depends on this would depend a lot on the energy cost, and this depends a lot. But I can tell you that the GPUs, when you are doing blocks in an average of 6 seconds, that means that the GPUs are only working around 30-40% of the time. These GPUs are about 600K, so you can do more or less the numbers. But I expect that it's going to be below 1K a month, definitively.
Okay. And do you think it's a problem that the GPUs are only using 40% of the time?
Well, it's what I say. I think that, I don't like the idea of even clusters. This is let's office clusters. I don't like this idea. I think that the nice thing of Ethereum is that Ethereum can run with home machines. Okay, the idea is to lower the hardware required. Lower hardware, and for me, I would say it's lowering the hardware required, but without having centralized infrastructure. And things for infrastructure, I think they are not good. I mean, at least they are less decentralized, and they are not good, and they are problematic. At this point, for example, MEVs and block builders are, I think, that are a little bit problematic for Ethereum, because this is a central point on there. And provers could be another, provers could be another centralized point in there. And if you join them together, this is even worse. But yeah, we can talk about that.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. And it was specifically with the fact that we're optimizing for multiple things at once. We heard a lot of talks about real-time proving, but the faster your proving cluster goes, and it has to be a cluster co-located to go really, really fast, you also have higher and higher underutilization of GPUs. So like you start having like 160 GPUs to like hit some benchmarks, and you actually look at the utilization, you're like, I probably had 40% utilization. That actually greatly contributes to cost. And I think that the current problem with ZK adoption currently, like the types of customers that we have in production currently, the main bottleneck for further adoption is actually cost right now. So it ends up actually being much more cost effective to reduce latency requirements in the short term. But again, once we do optimize for all of these things, we're going to see that actually, like, oh, if the latency requirements are a little bit lower, then we could actually get home provers faster. So I actually participated with my gaming PC on our network as well. My machine did not do more than 1 megahertz, so I'm not doing real-time proving of Ethereum, but I can do useful work, and it could help rollups scale and transition from optimistic rollups to ZK rollups today. So it's an incremental process, and I think that there's going to be some steps that we're going to take, but we really need to solve the cost problem. And yeah, the underutilization aspect of it is actually the reason that we had to shut down the AWS cluster. Like on-demand resources on AWS, the amount of time spent to like actually spin them down and to spin them back up actually just made it so infeasible that we priced out most use cases. So we're extremely happy to be sunsetting that product at the end of the year.
Wow, that's super interesting. That's good to know. I guess, Alex, maybe you could add a bit to like the engineering costs that would actually go into this, if you have any idea about that. I guess about running the provers.
Yeah, like exactly. Maybe what's interesting to add is like as I hear you speak, you say like the costs seem kind of high, and I'm thinking like actually they seem not that high to me. They seem like very reasonable. And if I would say anything, like, on some level, I think it's going to be a trade-off of what we want. Like decentralization, of course, is very important, but we also need people to be using the network, right? The other thing that we really want. And I think that scaling the network is one of the most effective things we can do to bring more transactions on chain. And if I very quickly think, do some mental math and say, like, say that we can only, we increase the block space massively, and we get just twice the amount of total transaction fee volume, then this like is way, way, way worth like running, what is it, K of N, like K of these like instances, all funded by these entities that are currently involved in the block building pipeline. And in fact, like my very next question would be like, why are we holding it back? As I understand from people today, costs are going down. If they go down, we would like to even push further and go for even bigger blocks. And I would say in this case, especially like, yeah, it'd be a profitable move to make, right? To say, why not push even further? We're very, very happy to pay more because yeah, economically this makes sense for us. But I totally hear your concern. Yeah.
You can scale. I mean, you have a centralized cluster and the network grows. Probably you have to add more. I mean, more workers there. But I like the idea of. I mean, if you have the workers spread around the network and the incentives are aligned,
right.
Then. I mean, if you have more demand, you will have more supply because I mean you will have more incentive to put more provers there, and I think this is something that scales could scale better. Of course, if the protocol is designed in the right way, which probably is a difficult part here on what we are talking about. But its model for me is decentralizing the provers. I mean, do not depend on a single server, or if you want a small set of server or clusters for building the proof.
Thorsten, do you have any thoughts about that? Should we just increase throughput if we can?
I am torn. Right? On the one hand, I love the idea of for liveness and for scaling, we do decentralization here. I'd also want to say, we always have to think, why are we decentralizing? In this case, we wouldn't do it for censorship resistance. For censorship resistance, we already have decentralized the testers and we have Fossil. I'm assuming Fossil goes in. If there's somebody at the EF, please make that happen, yeah?
Agree.
So that gives us our censorship resistance. That's the broadly set up home and solo stakers now. And we still need them for that. When we then say, okay, now put a GPU in there or use your gaming rig when you're not actually actively playing World of Warcraft and do some proofs at that point, on the one hand, that sounds really great. Maybe we can scale faster that way. On the other hand, we're now introducing latency. We're introducing complexity. So the question is it necessary complexity? Can we survive these latencies? Does it constrain us in growth? Where a properly incentivized group of, 10, 20, 50 provers or whatever can just scale that on an enterprise level potentially much faster or in a more controlled way, right? We're not saying we hope we have enough GPUs online right now. We know we have enough GPUs online right now. So I'm torn. I want to advocate for home and solo stakers to prove, but I'm also conscious of the technical difficulty to do so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think many of us are torn in that sense. Okay, so Lucian, you spoke to it a bit already, but maybe we could hear some more. What do you think are the vectors of competition among provers? So you spoke to it because you mentioned that the underutilization, for example, could be something that you need to improve on.
Yeah, I think right now the state of ZK VM development requires large proving clusters, and then it's just a question of incentive and mechanism design to get the largest number online today. We also have a bit of a disadvantage right now because I think we do have a floor. There's an opportunity cost because we're in the middle of like the craziest AI bubble, and the optimal hardware actually matches the top of the line GPUs. So like you had to go to Switzerland to get sources of GPUs, and that was 16. And like, yeah, I mean, we're really fortunate in the fact that like we're not actually trying to run infrastructure ourselves currently. We're actually just trying to make the incentives correct so that the people who have access to large data centers with GPUs already and the lowest cost of electricity get online. So in terms of like driving down cost, I think that's the most important one. And then the next step is like, what token is used to make the payment? The ticker is still ETH, right? Yeah, so you make proof requests in ETH, you do it on chain, and you match the actual liveness guarantee of the chain that you request. And once you have that proof request, and you either have an option, and I read your paper that you sent over, you have an option to either have a ton of people racing and like have a prize pool, or you have someone lock in and you only have one person working on one proof request at a time. That's the option that we took because it's going to drive down costs. So if someone doesn't fill it in, that proof request, then you need slashing. And this is effectively like the design decisions that have gone into Boundless and that are all live in production today.
Okay, cool. Maybe Leland, you could tell us a bit about your system.
Yeah, I think in our view, the best way to reduce costs is just merely making your proof system more performant. So for example, in May, when we did real-time proving, we used 160 GPUs, which was tremendously expensive, but come today, we're only using 16, and the same as Zisk. And so when you get this like 10x improvement, like your costs like go down like proportionally. And so our view is like, we should eke out as much algorithmic improvements as possible, along with like GPU improvements, and try to use as little GPUs as possible. And let's say we want to double the block size or 10x the block size, and we have to like 10x the GPUs. Sure, like 160 GPUs are expensive, but for context, Ethereum gives out like 4 billion in incentives every year, which seems like very paltry to, let's say, like $1 million to build out a proving cluster. So if you have like 100 proving clusters, say $100 million, it's like very little compared to 4 billion. So maybe like it's actually okay to have lots of GPU. It's okay to like, really step on the gas pedal today.
Okay. So in this part of the panel, I wanted to sketch a bit. So like, what does it take to create these proofs, and what is the supply side of the market? I think Jordi, you've been aiming already at the demand side, and I guess you guys have been talking about it a bit as well. You guys are envisioning the prover market model, and I think Jordi, you might be envisioning something different. How do you envision the money actually going through to the provers?
I mean, the easiest part is, I mean, the same way that there is a budget assigned for validating, it should be a budget assigned by the provers. This is one way to do it. The other is maybe it could be a percentage of the gas. That's another way of taking at that. I'm assuming here that the gas cost of the chain is more or less the same that the proving cost. That's another way to look at it, but I think that I believe that needs to be embedded somehow in the protocol. So I think that the incentive needs to be set in the right way, so that, and the incentive needs to be for decentralizing the provers. I mean, this is the it's a matter of setting up so this is how you collect, okay? So you collect probably, okay, it's part of the gas, it's easy, okay, we already collect there, okay? But then it's how we distribute them. Well, they distribute to the people that's doing the proof. Here we can play a game in the first come, first serve, but this is very inefficient probably. I believe more in okay, you have a more pre-assigned works, maybe redundant, some redundancy. This is a little bit inefficient. I mean, in general, decentralization means some sort of inefficiency because you are buying other things. It also adds some sort of complexity. I mean, it's much difficult to run a chain than to run an SQL server. We know that, but finding the right balance and understanding that decentralization is important and that decentralization have a cost. It's okay. I mean, I think we need to accept that, and we need to set up the incentives in that direction.
Okay. So what I hear is that at least the collecting money part should either be transaction fees or I guess the protocol issuing some sort of money.
These are the two that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
But maybe there are others, but for me it's like a variable cost or a fixed cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to pose the different perspective, I've heard that people say builders could run provers themselves, and they could fund it, for example, out of MEV or some other source. I don't know, Alex, if you have any insights into whether that would be viable?
Yeah, I think that would be very reasonable. In fact, like you still need the block, right? There's already competition in Ethereum today for the transactions. They already flow through private pools, and you need something to prove. So if you have the transactions and they're coming from the builder, I imagine there's already an economic relationship between the two. Like if there would be a lot of payment to the provers, but you need the transactions to do it, then already you would expect there'd be some kind of back and forth to find a balance of what that split would be. I don't know where it would fall, but also to the question of, for example, efficiency, I imagine that, yeah, if you already have a fight between builders to figure out who has the most valuable block, and that auction is won, so to speak, from there, for a builder, it's very straightforward. Like you talk to all the provers, you say, "Hey, I need this proof. This is how much time I have. What is it going to cost me?" And you get like a very standard market in which people can offer to deliver the proof. Of course, it might get like more difficult with. No, I can imagine that even networks plug in into that model just fine. And then maybe one more small addition, like to the decentralization question. That like we have fossil for censorship resistance. If liveness is a big concern, which I think is very fair, I would sooner expect that there's some kind of like penalty of incentive to do something about that directly. Although, I will recognize like it's a very tough question as well.
Do you think builders will verticalize, and how many builders are there in practice?
Verticalize. I guess I haven't thought enough about like the benefits of verticalizing. I can say that on a day-to-day basis as a relay, it's very clear what the benefits would be of verticalizing. So I feel like that will come down to, what is your moat? What is your unique advantage, right? And if it's very copyable, and if the chart for hardware costs keep going down, then there's a point where I think builders will say, I think we can do the DevOps, We don't mind buying 16 CPUs. I actually know a guy who loves messing with CPUs. I did a bit of it myself way back in 2015. We'll figure it out. But yeah, this is my take it with a grain of salt.
Leland, what do you think? Can builders just pay it out of MEV, or do we need something?
Yeah, I suppose builders can pay on a MEV. I think what would be more interesting, as Jordi alluded to, like today, Ethereum has like execution layer rewards and consensus layer rewards. Because in the ZK proving paradigm, a tester is no longer have to do as much work. They don't need to re-execute the entire block. In theory, the consensus layer rewards can be decreased. And so if they're decreased, maybe that money should be shifted directly to the provers to incentivize a more decentralization. The main reason why I don't like builders paying directly for proof generation is I think it's very likely for builders to become verticalized. You'll reduce latency. And in practice, there's only 3 or 4 builders that kind of dominate everything. And if our goal is to build a really robust system that's always online, we want to have lots of provers. And in order to have lots of provers, we need to compensate them accordingly. And so having it as an in-protocol mechanism, I think will establish a floor of revenue to encourage all provers to participate.
Okay, and Lucian, have you thought about that?
I mean, all of these proposals just sound like a ton more money into our marketplace, so absolutely. No, I mean, realistically, I prefer the idea of transaction fees primarily because I want client-side proving, and I think that we can actually, if we can do client-side proving easier if we do transaction fees based on ZK. So if you start a ZK computation, then you can potentially have less fees because it's less work for the prover clusters. And yeah, I mean, there's things that are great for boundless is bottom line, right? But then there's also just getting the right mechanism design. And mechanism design on L1, I think, is really fragile. I'm actually concerned about the idea of MEV and block builders being the one who does proving, primarily because MEV becomes more valuable the more latency you add before you actually start proving. So you have this really perverse incentive in which it's okay, maybe I'll start proving only after 6 seconds, 7 seconds, and then it just creates a really kind of strange, perverse incentive. It does create an arms race to who can ZK prove things the fastest, but I'm not necessarily 100% sure that it's going to be free speed.
That makes sense. Alex, I see you. Okay, let's quickly dive into that, but we don't have much time. So maybe Jordi.
I mean, probably it's the most natural. I mean, the most natural way of. I mean, who has an incentive to build the proof is the proof builder, because I mean they want to. I mean, the idea here is, if you generate the proof, probably you will be able to build bigger proofs, and then you will have the incentive to. I mean, they are going to be validated. So maybe the validators have a limit on how much they can prove by themselves. And the idea is, okay, the builder will generate bigger proofs, so it can be bigger block. I mean, has a right. I mean, it's very easy and it's very natural to go that direction. The problem is that this goes against the principle. And I may mention at some point where more block builders are removed, maybe because of privacy, and then we still have the proof there. I mean, I don't like as a model, but I understand that this is probably the ones that have the incentives are the builders, so maybe unfortunately this is the easiest path.
Okay, moving on from the MEV, Thorsten, do you think that paying out of issuance would be viable for provers?
Oh, I've been told I will get things thrown at me if we pay out of issuance.
From who?
The audience. We will not be allowed to raise issuance. We could pay out of issuance if we reduce issuance for testers and then shovel that over to provers. Can I briefly say something about MEV?
Go for it.
I fully agree with you that perverse incentives are a problem. I think the perverse incentives also apply to people like you. They apply to core devs, they apply to researchers, because now we're enshrining the idea of MEV in the protocol as necessary to pay provers. And then if we have the other push to say, but that's bad for users, we want to reduce MEV, particularly sandwiching toxic forms of MEV. Now we have this force that says, but we can't do that, then who pays the provers? Let's not go there. Yeah, okay, so out of issuance, maybe. I currently like your idea better to pay out of the transaction. It's an execution layer function. We're paying the execution layer right now from the TX fees. We're paying the consensus layer from issues. issuance, so why not keep paying the execution layer proving from transaction fees?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe if I can very quickly add to that, because you're taking MEV apart from transaction fees, but actually I like the transaction fees idea too. I think today, again, not a block builder ourselves, exploring that direction, but even today, that does pay a lot to block builders. Block builders are just concerned with building the most valuable block, and one way they do it is by including as many transactions as possible. And then there's complex mechanics between order flow auctions and block builders, and who gets exactly how much and what gets refunded to the auction, or maybe even the user through the wallet. But being paid from transaction fees sounds great. But I do think we might still have this interaction between the builder and the prover, and who ends up with what.
True.
Yeah.
And also, I just have to say, from a principle, if we're going all in on ZK, like, let's actually keep the zero knowledge. Let's do the research to actually have private mempools, and maybe do away with MEV entirely if we can.
Okay.
Encrypted mempools, I like it.
Leland, maybe you could tell us, can we learn anything from how the L2s pay for ZK proofs, and does that inform what we can do on the L1?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Succinct, we have this library called OP Succinct. It basically turns a OP stack rollup into a ZK rollup. We currently have 3 chains live on mainnet. And so how these chains pay for proving is actually through transaction fees. So we've upstreamed the change to OP stack called like an operator fee. And so every time you send a transaction, some small slice of it goes directly to the prover. And so like, yeah, if we look at prior literature, like yes, we could use transaction fees directly. But I will caveat, L2s are very different because L2s generally don't have inflation baked into their protocol.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I think we're going to have to round up, but I'd like to hear from each one of you. Is there any takeaway that you'd like the audience to have, or any takeaway for yourself from the panel? And maybe we could start with you, Lucian.
I mean, I think the key takeaway is that there are certain principles that you have to stick with, even when we do a massive change in paradigm. You need to have the right to be able to run your own prover. You need to have the right to be able to actually just see the entire stack and have it be open source, run the cryptography yourself, and verify that it's correct. And the current state of ZKVMs and its relative maturity also requires at least a 2 of 3 verification system. And having worked on the operations side and worked with partners in production, we need to make this very clear. If you are running a production blockchain ZKVM system and you are enabling fast withdrawals from that verification, and your actual verifier is also permissionless, you probably need a 2 of 3 proof system immediately. And it doesn't really matter, because you can't just go all in on one proof system, just be like, oh, there won't be any bugs. We haven't figured that out yet. So we have to make sure that we have at least a 2 of 3 proof system, and that we think about that going forward. And how we actually have the same thing of client diversity with ZKVM diversity is actually not a solved problem. Do we set up a 2 of 3 base proof systems on a per client basis? I think that is actually the best way to do this. So I also want to put that out there.
I think my view is if we want to optimize for getting to gigagas as fast as possible, we should throw as much money to provers as possible so that the ZKVMs become more and more performant, hence direct incentives.
Okay. Thorsten, any final thoughts?
First, thank you for spending time with us here instead of at the music stage. I know that we're not nearly as exciting. I've seen different numbers for where we're going. I've seen 100xing the gas. I've also seen 540xing the gas to 24.3 gig, I think it was. That's very exciting. I love that. And we need to make sure we keep our soul, right? While we're competing with other chains that are in that kind of throughput, can I say, Solana? Then we must not lose of what makes Ethereum, and that makes decentralization, right? And so we want to bring everyone along here, and that means we need to stay decentralized. Even in parts where we say, oh, we can centralize this, and we still have fossil, right? No, let's try and keep proving decentralized as well. Let's make an effort.
Okay, great. Alex, any final thoughts?
No, I can I think wholeheartedly agree with that. Let's make sure we keep the properties, but also let's scale Ethereum, and let's scale it a lot.
My thoughts is, I mean, ZK is really important for decentralizing Ethereum, but for scaling Ethereum. Today we unblock the first client. I mean, we were using for first time ZK proof in Ethereum somehow. I mean, this is, I think, historical thing today, and what it means that this goes fast. And now that's still early because I mean we just unplug it there. We are on time to set up the right incentives mechanism and to think in the right way. So I think that for me the takeaway is the importance of defining this protocol, having clarity in Ethereum. I think this is an important thing, and this is part of scaling Ethereum. If we don't define the right incentive, the right protocol for how the provers should be plugging in the network, we risk in changing the values of the network. So I think this is important, and it's the biggest takeaway that I'm taking from here.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think we could talk probably for hours, and maybe we should actually. But yeah, I think we'll have to round it up here. So thanks a lot to the panelists, and thanks to the audience for being here on Saturday.
Thank you all. All right, that concludes ETH Proofs Day. We hope to see you all in Cannes. There is a DevConnect happy hour happening right now. Hope to see you there too.